All right, guys, what is up? Welcome into another episode of GC Live. I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark talking Gamecock football, even though if you're on the video version, we left the baseball field as the background. So we will get that corrected here in a moment. But first, let me tell you about our guy, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797. NMLS number 71597. As we always tell you, if you are in the market for a new home, hit up our guy Clint at that phone number or go check out more information about everything he's got going on. I know right now, again, I never want to be that person that gets on there and tells you, hey, it's the best time ever to buy right now. Obviously, interest rates, they actually, Chris, have, in a big picture standpoint, have gone back up here as of late from what I've been reading. And, that actually, though, is why you want someone like Clint on your side, because there are so many little nuanced decisions you have to make when buying a home. And you're not always going to buy a house at the absolute perfect market time, right? So if it's the point in your life where you are buying a house, you feel like you need to buy a house, you want somebody on your side who can, Chris, even tell you, hey, do I lock this rate or do I float this rate? Which, depending on all these other circumstances, may be a different decision. It's never going to be just lock it or just float it. When I bought a house through Clint a long time ago, it was just me based on the current situation then. We floated it. When me and my wife ended up buying a house together and interest rates were what they were then, he was like, dude, we need to lock this as soon as possible. So there are all these little decisions that Clint will help walk you through. And if homeownership is something you're just kind of working towards, Clint is going to help you come up with a plan for that as well. So I trust him completely and have no problems whatsoever saying that and pushing you guys, if you're wanting to buy a home, to go talk to Clint at 803-422-6797.
And similar deal for our friends over at Ferry Chevrolet. If you're in the market for a newer used vehicle, if you're thinking about being in the market, always ask, give those guys an opportunity to earn your business. And I'd take a guess, you probably are really going to like them. Fourth generation dealer Joseph Ferry, still running the show over there at Ferry Chevrolet. That's ferrychevrolet.com, F-A-I-R-E-Y, ferrychevrolet.com. You can check out their financing options online. You can check out their inventory of new and used vehicles. And they've been around, guys, since 1926, located conveniently in Orangeburg, right between Columbia and Charleston. Got their start and their roots in St. Matthews, South Carolina. Still operating to this day. Honesty, integrity, handshake. That's how they work. Car buying process, not always great, not always something that's super fun to go through. They will take care of you there and do a great job for you. ferrychevrolet.com or 803-937-4531. Give them a call if you're in the market for a new used vehicle, or check out their website for more information.
Yeah, definitely want to thank those great sponsors for helping make this show possible. As Matt says, maybe the baseball background will give some good luck to the baseball team. They need it right now. They need all the help they can get, to be completely honest. So maybe we can send some good vibes their way. But the title of today's show, Chris, is what are realistic expectations for South Carolina's latest signee, Neff Giwa? And Chris, I want to talk about the most overused word in sports media. And to me, and actually I'm gonna give you two very overused words. So the two most overused words in sports media are interesting and intriguing.
I feel seen.
Man, this is going to be interesting. Hey, that'll be an interesting game. This will be an intriguing game. You've told me nothing. So
I'm hurt. My feelings are legit hurt right now.
I'm talking about all of us, dude. It's the most. I got nothing to kick off this sentence with, or I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next. Man, this will be an interesting matchup. No, obviously it will be. The two most overused words in coaching and sports and evaluation upside and potential.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to break all the rules on this, though, man. I'm going to go ahead and say it is okay to say the Neff Giwa career, dare you even say a little bit of an experiment, the whole thing is going to be one of the most interesting careers to watch in recent South Carolina football memory because of his upside and potential.
Man,
And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, that gets thrown around way too much, what I just said. But in this case, ding, you can allow it because the array of possible outcomes for this are from the absolute highest ceiling to the absolute lowest floor.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have an athlete with numbers reportedly on par with guys who were at the top in the NFL combine this year. And you also have a football player who has never actually played football.
Yeah, it's kind of like the description we got. It's like has never put on shoulder pads and a helmet at the same time, right? Like pretty extreme, right? Because if you say, hey, this 40 time would have been the fastest at the combine, this vertical jump would have been and it's like true, but also never played football, So it's like the guys at the NFL combine have played football, lots of it, when they go out there. And so you also, Wes, you did a bonus because you included not my personally, but on my list of most overused phrases, you used the word experiment. That's
Okay.
on my personal list. Please,
I'm gonna look
everybody.
for that now.
Yeah.
I don't think I've noticed that one for you, but I'm gonna look for that now.
The so-and-so experiment is a failure. The whatever experiment, I feel it's not used as much as intriguing or interested, probably. Still very overused. Very overused. Very overused. So
we're hitting all the bingo.
All the bingo card is completely. What's the
Yeah.
one blackout bingo where you just try to hit all of them on the card at the same time?
Yeah, we hit them in the first 5 minutes of the show.
That's what we've done. But like, man, I'm trying to think of another word to describe it. Fascinating. Well, I mean, like, you've got this kid that kind of just came on this. He hasn't even been on the scene for long. It's like he pops up. Here's this kid, rugby player, international player. And it's not like this thing was percolating for a few months. It's like, here he is, boom, offers, coming left and right. Here's South Carolina. Here's Miami. Same organization, Wes, PPI, Brandon Collier, runs camps, like finds prospects who sometimes have a football background, an international football background, sometimes not much of any football background, right? Like he'll find guys and help put them on the radar that were soccer players or whatever it may be. And so when you look at Neff Giwa, this is a guy that, again, hasn't put on shoulder pads and a helmet, hasn't played in a snap of competitive football, but yet he has those traits where you're like, man, if these traits can translate, it could really turn into something, And I think in one way, it's exciting because if you're South Carolina, you're bringing this guy in, low risk, potentially extremely high reward. This is not a kid where you're going, hey, could he end up playing some snaps for us this year? Like, I think you need to bring the expectations super low because if that happened, it would be the bonus of all bonuses. But with development and you have a completely blank slate to work with, which I think in one way you go, okay, there's a lot of development to do. On the other hand, you're starting from a completely blank canvas. You don't have to teach this kid, hey, your footwork is completely jacked up. Hey, these are the techniques that you were taught in high school or wherever, or the previous college you came from. We're doing it this way. You get to get him in this summer and teach him that from the very start. And you add this guy in as just a raw athlete. where the payoff could be substantial. Now, offensive line, very developmental position. I think you put it well on the radio earlier. Offensive line and quarterback, two hardest positions, two of the most developmental positions on the field, the two most developmental positions, I think. And so we've seen some examples of development of guys that we might as well go ahead and use it again, intriguing when they got to Carolina, right? I think there's different levels to it. There's Nick Harbor, who comes in as a guy with Olympic track speed, who, yes, had a football background, but not at receiver. Like, he was still very much learning how to play receiver. I even think, Wes, of a guy like Darius Rush, right, where you're bringing him in, football background, yes, standout track athlete at a smaller school level. I always looked at him and went, man, I'd really like to see what he looked like as a DB. Came to Carolina as a receiver, took a while, and then eventually became an SEC starter and gets a shot in the NFL, right? This Neff Giwa get is like the most extreme of all examples, because the measurables in the athleticism are absolutely off the charts, but there's absolutely no football background that you can look at. So it's a pure projection. It's an athletics experiment. I'll use that word again. But if it pays off and he's got the athleticism to where you wouldn't be surprised if it did, that's potentially a great move for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, so the numbers 6'7.5", 295, 300, something like that. That's pretty obviously that's like elite size already for an offensive tackle. He actually, though, Chris, is going to have to gain some weight looking at him, because he is so tall, he is so long, and he carries 300 pounds, about like a lot of guys carry 230, 240, honestly. Now, the frame appears to be there, and I got to imagine, with him playing rugby and soccer and the different things, never has really, I would imagine, been lifting to gain a bunch of weight and muscle mass. So, this dude could be an easy 330, I think, once he gets deep into an SEC weight program, and the amount of just calories and protein that those guys are going to be able to eat on a daily basis in the SEC. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. But, you look at the rest of the measurables, reportedly 4.88 in the 40-yard dash. That would have been the fastest time among offensive linemen. This let me make sure I got this right. Would have been the fastest of any offensive lineman at this year's combine. And Chris, if you go to NFL.com, it will let you pull up. I think it doesn't go back forever. I think it goes back to about 2013 or so. So over 10 years, 4.88 would have been like a top 10 time out of anybody during that time. Now, if we're going to be, the whole point of this question is to be completely fair. At the combine, dude, they're putting you on a laser. Like, you are running a true 4.88. No exaggerations, no room for the stopwatch got clicked a little bit too fast. None of that. So, again, let's have some perspective. Now, at 6, almost 8, 300 pounds to run, even on a hand time, that's insane. The broad, which was 9 feet and 10 inches, would have tied with a center. Can't remember the guy's name, but it was a center who typically isn't going to be 6'7", 6'8", but still, that would have tied for the number one, like the longest broad jump in the combine this year. And the arm length, which people may say, well, who cares about arm length? It does matter for offensive tackles, because you're just talking about creating that distance between you and that edge rusher, that defensive end who is trying to obviously get around you and get in the backfield and get to the quarterback. You're able to create that room, create that space. And this is the one that actually is insane. 37-inch arms, the longest arms of any offensive line prospect this year at the combine was 34.5 inches. So just insanity there. Again, dude, high reward potentially, low risk. I also think worth pointing out, this report or tweet or whatever that was put out there about, well, South Carolina offered him this huge NIL deal in order to commit before he went to Miami. Without getting into the details of any of that, that's just simply not true. Like, we'll just put it like that. It's not true. We were told, according to multiple people, like, yeah, South Carolina prioritized him. They beat out Miami. They beat out Texas. They beat out Tennessee. They beat out some marquee programs, this kid. It's not like they dropped a bag, so to speak, for a guy who's never played organized football before. So yeah. We'll see, man. I mean, you're talking about a team, a program now that has on their roster, on campus, Nick Harbor, Dylan Stewart, Lenora Sellers, Neff Giwa, Jakarius Peak, when healthy. People forget Peak was on the freaks list from Bruce Feldman, who kicked off this recruitment, it seems like, last year when he was at NC State, and none of us would have had any reason to notice that at the time because he wasn't at South Carolina, obviously. But you are talking about a program that has definitely leaned into the measurables and the traits in terms of guys they've been able to get.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, especially when you pair it with, like, I think some different things happen. You hear about, oh, here's this freak guy who's going to play offensive tackle. And you may even breeze past the part where, like, not only is he inexperienced with football, he has no experience. Then you read about, again, as you pointed out, important to say inaccurately, like the idea of this bidding war. And you go, okay, boy, South Carolina must be going after this guy because they think he can come in and play right away. And that's really not it. Like, South Carolina is excited about this get, but there's not anybody in that building right now who's saying, we're really counting on him to come in and play this year, right? Again, if that happens, it's the bonus of all bonuses. This is a guy that you bring in because you're very excited about his athleticism and his upside, and then you see what happens, and it could pay off tremendously. If South Carolina was weighing, hey, we've got to go get another JUCO guy, or we got to go get another grad transfer guy, which is, I think, also possible and on the table, versus taking this guy and you got one spot, don't get confused that they're bringing him in in this class in the summer to mean, okay, they've got to get him ready to play this year. I don't think that pressure to do that is here. It is when you're bringing in guys through the transfer portal, right? As we know, Carolina rebuilt this offensive line room. This is part of it, but this is a little bit more of a down the road move. But man, I mean, you just think about this. I mean, we've seen Randy Clements has background in taking guys that have multi-sport backgrounds. He's had a player from Germany. He's had a guy with a hockey background that he developed into first and second round NFL draft picks. We've seen, I mean, the one I always love, Wes, Lane Johnson from the Eagles. When he got to college, he was a 6'6", 202-pound quarterback. And by the time he finishes his career, he's almost unrecognizable. He's this big monster offensive tackle who ends up being a first rounder and playing in the league for years. So I think that's the trajectory you're looking for. And that could the payoff be, this is an NFL offensive lineman from an athleticism measurable standpoint. Like, he checks those boxes very well, but there's a lot that goes into the game. You said this on the radio earlier. What does he think of the game of football? When he gets in, like, we don't have the answers to that. I think it's a positive that he has the right mindset. I think it's a positive, frankly, that he's a rugby player. Those dudes are built different in some ways. But there's so many questions here about it. But what he does have, Wes, that you just don't get guys that walk in your door every day or ever, is that amazing combination of, like, the size to athleticism ratio. He has that, and you can work with that.
Yeah, you got to be a little bit on the edge there, man, to play rugby. Like, these guys have a different type of toughness, honestly, and they're not all padded up. And I mean, to me, there's a little bit of curiosity about, can I play this guy in some weird role in year one? Like, Can I put him at tight end on the goal line? Can I put him on special teams? Can I do something with this? Like versus just tackle development. I do think, man, the more we hear, and let's use this to move it forward a little bit. Randy Clements, I can see why the more we hear about him, that Kendall Briles was like, that's my guy. Like I'm really not going to South Carolina without my guy. And along the same lines, I think we're also kind of seeing why Shane Beamer was like, Stan Drayton is my guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there is, and you need all types of coaches. You don't need all veteran coaches. Like, you need some young guys. You need that young energy a lot of times that comes. I think you need a balance on your staff. You really do. But with Clements, I think there's just a veteran, not even mindset in that he's just stuck in his ways, but I think there's a veteran confidence there from what you hear, in that I've got an answer for things. Like I know how we're going to attack this. I know how we're going to respond to that, depending on what fronts the defense is showing us. And I really think there's a great dynamic there with him and Jason Smith. And you've got a little bit of the veteran, a little bit understated at times. Like, I'm just going to show you how to do it, and you're going to do it because I know what I'm talking about. And then you have Jason Smith, who has the resume and the pedigree and all those things, man. Was a number 2 overall pick, played under Clements, trusts him completely, but has a little bit of that just younger guy edge, kind of that just energy, a little bit like, it's not good cop, bad cop from what we've heard. It's more just a very interesting dynamic, Chris.
Oh man, there you go. Yeah, the thing about that duo is Jason Smith, whether it's in recruiting or when you're reinforcing things in film and on the practice field, he can say, I was the number 2 pick in the draft behind Matt Stafford. I was coached by this guy standing beside me, playing in the offense that the guy in the next door was running, right? And so that gives you some cachet. Clements has been doing it for so long in this system, not his entire career, right? But once he hooked up with Art Briles and then Kendall, like, he's been doing it in this system, and the system has evolved and it changes year to year based on personnel. But it's very much this, here is what we do, here is what we have done. Now, what does that mean, like, in the short term? Well, we're going to find out this year. I think this offensive line room for South Carolina still has plenty of questions, right? You are in year 1 of kind of rebuilding that offensive line room. You've done that with a new scheme, with a new coach, a new room. You've done it with a lot of new personnel mixed in with some returners. And it's going to take some time, I think, to be fully what you want to be, and what you have to do in year 1 is make some improvements. This isn't going to be, I don't think, the best offensive line in the SEC by the time it's all said and done. But you hope that the combination of all those factors, the personnel, the coaching, the new voices, the new scheme, will help you get better. You also have a question of, Jacarius Peak, right? We all know his health. You mentioned it earlier. That's another big, piece of this puzzle. But you do get the sense, like, just talking to people, that all of those factors have been good for the offensive line and just the offense and this team in general. It doesn't mean, boom, all of a sudden you go from worst to first, because South Carolina's offensive line last year and the offense generally was, one of the worst in the league, one of the worst in the country in certain metrics. It's a big leap to go to becoming, dominant, or whatever people want to say. But can you improve? That's the key. So I think, you hear some positives in terms of just them being in good hands there. I think something as simple as having the O-line coach and the OC having a great working relationship, and the offensive line coach knowing the offense like the back of his hand, is a positive too. We'll see what it means for results, but I think it's a good foundation, to lay for that.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Let's get into a little bit of intel, man. Some stuff that we've maybe probably written about on Gamecock Central already. I know you've got some stuff up today. And if you want to read more about Giwa, I've got some stuff up on him too. And got some recruiting stuff going up today and tomorrow as well. They had some prospects on campus, including, I would say, a very intriguing new offer to an in-state prospect from Sumter, who plays quarterback but is being recruited by Carolina as a running back. If we have time, we'll get into him. But I'll have an article up either today or tomorrow with his reaction to that offer. And Chris, like I said, let's talk about maybe some newcomers who just have continued to generate buzz, or maybe even a few guys who have taken a step forward, it appears so far this offseason. And I always think it's fascinating, man, when the freshmen get here and the combination of the guys that kind of just early on do kind of what we expect, even though they're freshmen. And I would put Jazavian Currents right there in that category. And, you look, so Torian Gray was asked about Currents today and said, he absolutely is going to have an opportunity to play a lot this year if he keeps coming along. I think that's someone we've kind of circled as like, hey, he may start this year. He may just push guys aside and be too good not to be on the field. Highly recruited, as we've talked about, had the massive senior year, played his best ball, has just hit the ground and continued to do that. And then, I think you look at other guys who maybe don't quite have that buzz. I would put Julian Walker like in that same category as Currents. Highly recruited, big senior year, has kept it going into spring ball, has been on the field a ton during spring ball, and it's going to play in some form or fashion this year. But then you got your guys like, Cassie Barnes, who we've mentioned a couple times. You've got, even Tristan Lewis, who comes in as a quarterback at Greenwood, starting to create some buzz for what he's done in camp so far. Noah Clark, to me, Chris, may be the kid. There's an argument to be made that we've heard more buzz, like the difference in buzz we've heard about Noah Clark compared to my expectations for him in year one. Like, I'm not saying that I didn't think he was going to be a good player, but just in year one, when I looked at who returns at defensive tackle, when I look at who they added at defensive tackle, when I look at Aiden Harris at defensive tackle as a fellow freshman, I was talking about the transfers there in terms of who they were added at first. Then you add in Aiden Harris. I thought, Noah might be a guy come in, red shirt, reshape his body, get used to. I mean, he's going to be asked to be that big, true nose or one technique, massive kid. It's just one of the most difficult things to do in football is play that spot as a true freshman. But, man, people do not stop talking about Noah Clark and how easy he's made it look so far.
Yeah, and I think, you got to square that with, like, the reality that South Carolina brought in 3 defensive tackles who have collegiate experience. And with Tommy, a ton. Kelby Collins at 2 different SEC schools, at Jordan Thomas, played a little bit at Georgia, but has been in a college program for a while now and is huge, right? And then returning guys, Troy Pikes, Gabriel Brownlow-Dendy, 2 freshmen who redshirted last season on this roster. So there is competition, but man, you're right. You don't stop hearing about this kid. And I think defensive tackle is one of those positions where it is, frankly, hard to get on the field as a true freshman. But I will say, with what we've heard about Noah so far, it does make you wonder, can he get on the field some and play not just some garbage time, late game snaps, but like some legitimate snaps? And I think at this point, you can't really rule it out. I think he's been better than expected in a lot of areas. One of them is just, if you've ever seen Noah Clark, he is a human eclipse. I mean, he is massive. I do think he's going to continue optimizing his body to where he's still kind of a baby face kid, right? I remember from the high school recruiting process, I think he's younger than his age a little bit. So he has a lot of growth that he can still do in those areas, but he moves really well for a guy that size. What is he? 6'5", 340, I think maybe is his listing, something like that. He moves well. He's heavy-handed. He's powerful. He's a really nice kid, but he has aggression, on the field from what we've heard. And so he has certainly created some buzz. And, as much as fans like big, huge defensive tackles in the game and here at South Carolina, I feel like he should probably be generating a little bit more buzz. Maybe it's just, Wes, tell me who's on the team when they get here. Maybe it's a focus, an outsized focus on transfer portal gets, but there's still some really good prospects and maybe year one players from this freshman class for South Carolina who could factor in this year. So time will tell if that ends up being Noah Clark. Maybe not as much as a Jazavian Currents, for instance, because of positional need, but he's absolutely created some buzz throughout spring so far.
Yeah, and I think, man, worth giving Jordan Thomas a little bit of love. I think too. I would say it certainly seems like Tomiwa and Kelby Collins, as veterans of the guys who have played a lot, they come in. You would say at least with a leg up on someone like Jordan Thomas, who has not played a ton, even though he's a transfer, but lots of ability there too, man. And I think the fascinating thing there is that they were in a hole at that position going into last offseason when TJ and Boogie, Taka, all those guys left, and you were going, man, they got to go portal, and then you get caught in that loop of portal. Well, they actually, now they're going to lose a lot from this year's squad if you go ahead and fast forward ahead of this season, but they may have recruited themselves out of that loop by not only adding a guy like Kelby, a guy like Tomiwa, but adding Jordan Thomas, who can come in, get used to everything, maybe play some this year, but then, move into a bigger role next season. You have Troy Pikes, who, played in the reserve role, probably takes on a little bit bigger role this year, and then has another year of eligibility after this season. And then you add in the freshmen, of course, and Noah and Aiden Harris, who we're talking about, and you're not going to quite be in a spot it doesn't seem on paper right now where you're going to have to say, well, we have to flip this entire room again, which is just very difficult to hit. I mean, it sounds like they actually hit on all those evaluations, which is very, very hard to do. And you don't want to count on that every year, because if you have a year where you get the reverse of that and you just miss on a bunch of guys, then you find yourself in trouble. So yeah. I think that's a good sign for the defensive tackles in 2026, but also there are some foundational elements there now if you're looking ahead to the defensive tackle room in 2027. And then past that, man, you really can't even start looking ahead too far these days. If you're 2 years ahead at a spot, you actually have to feel pretty decent in today's kind of structure with the way things are.
Yeah, and to go back to what you said about hitting, I think Carolina, it appears, may have hit on all three levels at defensive tackle, and that room, I think, has a chance, just based on what we've heard in spring so far, has a chance to be a strength, assuming they stay healthy in that room, to be a strength of the entire roster. And I'd put it in two categories, right? To make sure that people don't come away saying South Carolina's going to have the best defensive tackle room in the SEC. You've always got to wait until you see how things go against live competition against opponents, right? It's similar to the offense, right? Even though we've heard some good things offensively about how good the new scheme has been and how good Browse has been for the offense and for Sellers, if you're taking the, hey, show it on the field approach, that's very fair. I think that's what you and I are taking, Wes, in terms of this, because you never know until you get out there against live opponents in the SEC, against the schedule South Carolina plays, to see. But I also think there's some value to hearing, are you hearing positives or negatives, right? So if we were in spring ball right now and we had heard, this is just an example, well, the freshmen have hit a wall. It's kind of slow going. Ooh, I really don't know, man, if we hit on these transfers, like they just don't really look like what we thought they would be. Your antenna goes up, like you're a little alarmed. But what we've heard so far makes you think, all right, they have a chance because you know what you brought back. You were able to do well on the retention front there. The freshmen, especially with Noah Clark, there's been some positive returns, and there's been positive returns on the 3 transfers as well in terms of, hey, they are what we thought they would be, or in some cases, maybe more. Doesn't mean necessarily it's going to translate, but what we have heard so far, you'll take that all the time. And I think they're what, how many practices down? 8, 9, something like that.
I think 9 is
9, yeah. 9 was, I think, this weekend, maybe 10. We'll get a viewing window tomorrow morning on Tuesday, Wes, for I think number 10 or 11. So, you still have some questions about this team, right? Like just what we've heard so far. You might have questions about a few different positions more than others, but you also feel like there's been progress made in some other areas too.
Yeah, for sure. And I understand people taking a wait and see on a lot of this stuff, man, but it does still at least if you already, to your point, if you already have big questions about a spot right now and you brought in a bunch of guys and it's just not what you want it to be yet, then that's going to be a question from now into the season until you feel like maybe some guys step up or some guys develop or there's not really a spring portal anymore. And there's a lot of legislation out there right now about trying to keep teams from doing the old non-portal transfer as well. So in a lot of ways, unless you find another hidden rugby player who can come in a lot of ways, your roster is your roster at this point. So it's all going to be about development and putting these guys in a position to go succeed. Let's go back to maybe a couple things the coaches have said. You had a bunch of assistants speak last week. I think we talked a little bit about that on last week's show. Then you have several more. I've got to go back and actually listen to all the guys from today, but I have gone through Jack's notes. He was there at the press conference and, has some notes on the Insiders Forum there on Gamecock Central. But Chris, Stan Drayton, not really surprised to me to see this, but certainly seems like you're talking about someone with incredibly high expectations for his guys. It feels like there's a little bit of a perfectionist kind of attitude there. Like you're not getting away with anything with him kind of running the room. And he seems equally high on his guys while also kind of just matter-of-factly pointing out for several of the guys, hey, I want them to work on this. I want them to work on that. Here's what they need to do in order for one of them to step into being what he says he is looking for, which is that complete back. And it sounds like there's kind of, sometimes you have good depth in a room, but you also want to find the Rocket Sanders of a room.
Yep.
Right? So sometimes you have depth because you have depth. Sometimes you have depth because nobody has elevated among the bunch. So I do think that running back room, there are good signs there, but I also think you're going to want to hear, we've heard Matt Fuller has had a really good start to spring ball, or I guess 2/3 almost of spring ball now. Christian Clark has started to elevate. But it also sounds like from Stan Drayton talking, they still are looking for those guys to elevate even more going into the post-spring part of the offseason if that position is going to be a difference-making position against, SEC opponents this year.
Yeah, taking it from the on-paper depth to, all right, we've got a shot to make some things happen here because, I don't think there's any doubt, Wes, that they have, not just on paper, but in reality, more depth on the team, because you look at the credentials of the guys that are in that room. You've got 3 guys back who have all played some college football. You've added in 3 additional transfers who have all played college football, and all at, Penn State, Ohio State, right? And also you got 6 total guys there now, and all of them have the experience, but not one of them is like, hey, this guy rushed for 1,000 yards. You're not bringing in a Rocket Sanders who rushed for 1,400 yards at another SEC school. But what you are is bringing in some guys who were highly recruited. Jabari Coleman, committed to Georgia, ended up signing with Penn State, played under Drayton and redshirted last season. Sam Williams-Dixon, recruited to Ohio State, played a little bit there. Christian Clark, recruited to Texas, had 100 yards for them in their bowl game against Michigan, his last game as a Texas Longhorn, combined with what you've got in that room. But you are looking for somebody to separate and be that guy. I think you look back at Stan Drayton's career, he's had times where he has had the guy. He's had times where he's had maybe a couple guys. I think Penn State's probably a good example of that, right? He had Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Those guys got the most of the carries. Those guys both separated themselves from that room and said, we're the guys. So I think they're looking for somebody to take that and run. But I do think it's a pretty tight race because you have more competitive depth. You also, I'd go back to what you said about Drayton, Wes. He's not wanting anybody to rest on their laurels and say, I'm a complete back now, because frankly, nobody is so far. So who can be that guy? Who can be those couple guys? It seems like a really, really tight race. It seems like the presence of those other players in that room has kind of elevated everybody. I do think the new offense with Kendall Briles has been good for Matt Fuller. Matt Fuller is one of those guys of just get him in there, get him some space, see what he can do, help him play fast. And I think this offense has been good for him. He's probably the one, Wes, that's created probably the most buzz. But Isaiah had a really good offseason. We saw him in practice the other week when we had the viewing window, and you're like, wow, this kid looks really good physically, had a really good offseason. And I've heard Christian Clark's been making some strides and pushing too. You got Howell out there too, right? So you've got some guys in there with ability. But taking this offense from a group that did not produce in the run game last year for a lot of reasons to a group that can be really good for you. That's why you bring Stan Drayton in. That's why you retain the guys you wanted to retain and bring in some additional depth from the portal.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we got a couple questions in the chat. Austin asking, do we think a Tradez Green type package for him like LSU last year, potentially for Giwa? I don't know, Austin. I mean, you want to talk about wait and see. Like, I feel like any answer about him is like getting well ahead of ourselves. So, now, I'm intrigued about putting a 6'7.5" guy out there with long, if he can catch a football. I mean, who knows at this point? Now, dude, with somewhat the creativity of Kendall Briles, I'd line Giwa up and motion him out of the backfield and just have him out there on the perimeter and the goal line and just see what the defense reacts. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there are maybe some fun things you could do just using him even as a decoy at first, just because we have never – it's kind of – you know what the word actually should be instead of interesting or intriguing? It should be unprecedented, because I don't know that we've seen this – certainly have not seen this at South Carolina. Maybe some other programs have done something similar, but I'm not thinking of. But completely unprecedented in terms of just the all the factors surrounding this thing. And Chris Brent said, a question for you: is a rugby player a long-term goal for an NIL movie via Disney, similar to The Waterboy? Which, if this works out, it at least has 30 for 30 potential, I think.
Yeah, it's got some 30 potential. And they're making a lot of sports movies about a lot of different things, So I could see it. Kind of that whole like Blind Side, I mean, you could spin up something on Netflix about it, or a 30 for 30. Hey, if that happened, if people are saying this should be a 30 for 30, this should be a movie, this should be a documentary, things have probably gone well. That's a
Yeah,
good thing.
yeah, for sure. Trying to go through, man, to see if there's anything else from the coaches today that people would like to know. Let's see, Furry singled out Mazio Bennett, said that he really responded well to, last year not going the way that obviously Mazio or anybody wanted it to. Said Nitro Tuggle. That's someone, Chris, you and I have heard some good things about as of late. Is explosive and smart, continues to get better every day, has a lot of confidence, really pleased with where he's at. I mean, I continue to think with Nitro, it's just about consistency in terms of catching the football. Like, all the ability is there. We talked about what Torian said about Currents earlier. He said the nickel competition has been healthy. Gerald Kilgore and Quay Scott both playing quite a bit in there at nickel. And then, Chris, did you say you read through the Matthew Smiley stuff a little bit?
Yep, I did. A lot of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, a lot of kind of standard things. He did mention on Saturday that the conditions were really windy out there. They did some place kicking out there. Mason Love, he said, actually went out there and got 2 reps place kicking, and that he thought they were really good. He's also been working as a holder. Obviously, the punting duties, they seem to feel really good about there. The vibe I got, Wes, was still figuring out at kicker. He didn't dive in super specific, but it seems like between, and maybe you throw Mason Love in there, right? Even he's absolutely going to be your starting punter, but at place kicker, who is that guy between Max Kelly, Upton Belafont, who they brought in as a transfer? Does Mason Love throw his hat in that ring? We'll see. I kind of get the sense, putting together what Smiley said and maybe just some things we've heard as well, that they're not quite settled on who is the guy going to be. And Wes, we've seen that before. Even the example I love to go back to is, remember how tight the race was between Mitch Jeter and Alex Herrera at one point, and Jeter ends up winning the job, and he ends up being the guy and plays very well for you. I do think consistency is going to be big in the kicking game. That's what they're trying to find. I think they've got a couple guys in Kelly and Belafant who have the leg, but it's about trying to find the guy that you can trust and be most consistent. So at this point, I don't know if we'll leave the spring saying, hey, this guy has an absolute, I'm not trying to be punny, a leg up in the competition. I don't know if we'll hear that. That's literally what came to my mind. I was not trying to make a dad joke. This thing might spill over to summer, preseason. I wonder if we're going to know game one, like, are we going to know a couple weeks before this guy's absolutely handling the kicking duty? Seems like it's a pretty tight race still so far.
Well, and this would be what the third year that we're having does Mason Love? I thought I was having deja vu when you just went through that, because I was like,
I
wait a
know.
second, how many years has Mason been here now? He did redshirt his first year, but remember there was that talk, if guys don't step up, Mason Love may just take the kicking job as a true freshman. There was that talk last year. Could this be the year that finally happens? I don't know. We shall see. But if other guys aren't making kicks, then certainly it is nice to have Mason there as a fallback option, and someone that we know has a big arm and has some experience, at least being on the field as a punter. So maybe something to keep an eye on there for South Carolina, knowing that they're going to be, Chris, in a lot of close games, as they almost always are. You're going to have some games come down to kicks, and you got to make sure to have that situation obviously taken care of. Oh, let's see, man. We got about 8 minutes if we go until 3 o'clock. You know what, man? Let's talk a little bit of recruiting coming off of this weekend. Uh, Beyond the obviously we did with Giwa, but just in terms of this 2027 class and this Franklin Richardson offer. So we got wind on Friday that he was going to be on campus on Saturday and was an offer candidate from Sumter High. Chris, there wasn't even an on-3 rivals profile at this time, which probably there already should have been because there's an offer from Duke, from Coastal, from ECU, even before the South Carolina offer. So the word was getting out. This is someone that scored over 30 touchdowns as a junior this past year at Sumter High, but at the quarterback position. And it just kind of feels like not that Sumter is like middle of nowhere. There's a lot of people who live in Sumter, so I hesitate to say this is your like classic Palmetto State small town find, but it could. There are already signs that this could be your classic Palmetto State, a little bit unknown, a little bit under the radar guy who is playing one position, and teams start looking at him. Well, maybe he's not a quarterback, but can he play elsewhere? And for South Carolina, the 6'1", 220-pounder is being looked at and being offered to play running back. And interestingly enough on this one, Chris, sometimes you see guys who are, I would say, hesitant to transition away from quarterback. I mean, even DQ Smith, remember, he was dead set on playing QB right up to the last minute, and it's like, well, actually, he's going to go to South Carolina and play DB. It's worked out okay for him. He played his entire career. Something about being a quarterback, though, guys are like, man, I'm a quarterback.
Yep.
But Franklin Richardson, very open, possibly even prefers, I know certainly prefers the opportunity to get to play in big boy college football at the next level, and is incredibly open to playing running back. And the recruitment has really started to take off here. But I kind of like South Carolina's chances here, man. I think the in-state Gamecock offer was one that he definitely coveted.
Yeah, I went back because I was trying to watch some film to get a feel for, okay, how does this translate? What is South Carolina seeing on film here for a guy who plays quarterback and, looks big on film, like has some power when he runs, has some vision. I look back at one game, was trying to dig up some stats, and it's, oh yeah, he rushed for 200 yards and 5 touchdowns as a quarterback in a single game, and you're going, all right. But yeah, Carolina West, it looks like ideally, this is like ideal world scenario, probably want to sign a couple backs in this class from the high school ranks. And remember, this is a couple cycles now where South Carolina has not signed a high school back in a single one in either of the last 2 classes. And, with a room that has some experience in it, you got to figure you've got 6 scholarship guys on the roster this season. That's not going to be the case next year. You want to do a good job of not going portal only and being so portal reliant at the running back position. So it looks like they want to take a couple guys in this class. One of them, I think, Wes, whoever it ends up being, is probably, hey, this guy's a 3 or 4 star running back if you're looking at the rivals level. But it makes some sense when you're taking a guy like Franklin Richardson, who maybe doesn't play running back, but has the traits that you would look for, and seeing if you can successfully transition him to that position. But when you watch him on film, those of you on the video version can see it. I mean, he has some of those traits that make you think it could work.
Yeah, I think just as a guy who you always look at quarterback as well and the feel for the entire field, basically. And like there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of football IQ that I feel like translates from playing quarterback that I always think there's a little bit of value in getting these guys if they are open and willing to make that move. And certainly, like I said, with him, he is. And he's got running back size. I think it was pretty early on. We heard Drayton likes these sort of 210, 220-pound, like bigger physical running backs. And you have that here. I mean, dude, the very first clip I don't know if y'all saw my reaction, but the very first clip was him just like hammering into the end zone at the goal line and standing over a guy. So there's some physicality here. Like I said, I think it is early in the process, but I think South Carolina in a pretty good spot with him. I think, Chris, they're in a pretty good spot with Aiden Gibson from Woodruff coming off of a recent visit there. And then, of course, the other in-state kid, Trey Segura, that you would, want to keep a close eye on for South Carolina. So really 3 quality in-state running backs for this cycle. Richardson, certainly the more under-the-radar guy right now of them. But I don't want to say that means anything, man. Like we've seen guys pop up and just blow up in this state. So maybe he's the next on that. Hey, our guy Dennis with a question here, Chris. He said Giwa appears to play on a local team, little on the developmental side for Munster. How many offensive line projects have turned into starters on P4 teams? I mean, you were bringing up like the Lane Johnson argument earlier, or example, I should say. I wouldn't say it is like a common thing for guys just to – I mean, it's unprecedented for a guy to never play football and come in and win a starting job as an offensive tackle in the SEC. But again, this is – there's very little risk to South Carolina. Like you don't even just have 85 scholarships anymore. You have 105 scholarships. There's little to no risk and a lot of upside in bringing in someone like Giwa. But I think we've been pretty careful about not going Instagram on this. And what I mean by that is the just Instagram, social media, Twitter, this guy is definitely going to be a first-round pick type stuff.
Yeah. I think it's hard to give an accurate, draw a parallel because I don't know if I can't think of an example of this happening. Now, maybe you say, hey, there's this guy that never played football and ended up doing this. There are guys that get to college that have not played or junior college, right? Like the one example, I mentioned it briefly earlier, Danny Watkins, who ended up playing at Baylor for Randy Clements and then played for the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL. In high school, he went to high school in Canada, was a part-time firefighter, did not play football. He played rugby, actually. He played hockey. Then he went to junior college, played football, became a junior college All-American, and then went to Baylor in 2009 and ended up being a starter both seasons, ended up being a draft pick and playing in the NFL. So, nobody can say, yes, it's very common for guys who've never played football to become NFL football players. It's not common. Are there some examples of it? Sure. But I do think you look at the traits, the mental makeup, all those things, and you figure out, could it possibly work? And I think that's what South Carolina is doing here. They're saying, we're going to take a guy who's an elite level athlete with no experience, and we're going to bring him in not with the idea of, hey, we really need this guy to be our starting right tackle, our starting left tackle. We really need this guy to be our second string backup this year. You're not doing that. You're bringing him in more for, can we develop him longer term? And it's tougher. That's what you want to do with offensive line anyway. You got the portal nowadays. Everybody's kind of a 1-year player. But this is not a player that anybody was going to bring in with designs on, okay, this is our guy this year, right? This is a lower risk, developmental type guy to where if it pays off, it could be a potentially big payoff. But a lot of to go through before you know the answer to that.
Yeah, incredibly rare for that to happen, but incredibly rare for guys to be almost 6'8", 300 pounds with a 4.88 40-yard dash and 37-inch arms. So we'll see. And you know what, Chris? He was going to have to kind of come in with a mindset of, there may be some rough days. You know what I'm saying? This is not going to be easy right off the bat. It's going to be a developmental process. And that is hard to do. Like, that is hard to come in and just not play for a year, for 2 years, and wait your turn and develop, especially as much attention as the last 2 to 3 weeks have brought to this guy. So, like I said in the open, man, intriguing and interesting, and it's actually okay to say that this time. So, all right, y'all, that's it. We're going to close it out. He is Chris. I am Wes. Shout out to you guys for hopping on the chat. Had a pretty good group today in terms of numbers, it looked like, too, that were listening in. So we thank you all for that. We thank our great sponsors, too, for making this show possible. And we thank you guys for watching and listening. We will be back at some point soon to talk about the latest on South Carolina spring football. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see you soon.